7GUI is great. If you go to their website, they have 7 tasks related to user interfaces that can help show how your user interface library works. So today we're going to go through each of the 7 tasks, implement them in Membrane, and demonstrate how a workflow could work with Membrane. So this is still a work in progress. These tools haven't been released yet. There's still a lot in flux, but hopefully I can give the impression of what building a user interface in Membrane can look like. So this isn't a tutorial. I know it's a lot to ask to not focus on the details, but that's what we're going to do here today. So let's pull up the counter here. So we'll start with this task. And to do that, we're going to add a component, call it timer or counter. We're going to give it some data. And so let me give the lay of the land here so you can kind of see what you're looking at. Over here on the left is a component picker. This is like a toolbar. This is a web browser that shows the 7GUI web page. You have a tree view. We have a preview of the component that we're working on. We have a detail view that shows the component that we've selected. And then we have some data that I've put here that we'll be using as we go along. So we have a counter, and then we'll add a flex layout with a paragraph and a button. So these are offset, so let's center them. Let's click on the button here. So the preview is not only a display of the current work in progress, it's also editable and can be interacted with, although there's still only limited interactions that have been implemented. But we can go ahead and type in a label for this button. We can update the label for this paragraph over here. So this is going to display the current count. So previously, for our component, we gave it some data. So we gave it both some defaults, and these are now the properties that the component is expecting, the data that it's expecting to use, and that data is available within the component to reference. So num here corresponds to num there. And the last step for this component is to, when you click on it, we need to add an intent. One of the main responsibilities of a user interface is to turn user input, like keyboard and mouse events, into user intents. And the implementation for those intents, the effects that those cause, is kind of outside the responsibilities of the user interface. So we're going to increment num. We're actually increment, and then we'll pass this. And so this is the component which has all of the data that it'll essentially look like this map here with and so we can actually, so over here on the left we have all of the little widgets here, and we have the workspaces here. So we can go to Emacs and we can see that the in general, I probably won't go over the implementations for the effects. That's that's just normal Clojure code. You get data and you can do whatever you want with it, but we'll cover this simple one. So there's an increment effect right here. And so there's an effect update that we can use to increment that number that we were referencing. And one thing to point out here is that the effect system is embarrassingly simple. It's an integration point for Membrane, so you can kind of replace it with whatever you want. And so this is the point in your program where you're now decoupled from the user interface, and the UI library shouldn't get in your way. You should be able to write normal Clojure code that takes data and does stuff with it. So let's go back to our UI editor. We can eval and show this component. And if we click on the count button, it increments. So we've now implemented the very first challenge of showing the basic ideas of the language and toolkit. So let's go to the next task, a temperature converter. Let's add a component, give it a name. So with this component, we're going to demonstrate a technique So I'm adding asterisks to the name to the end. And the reason that doesn't have any special significance other than to say that this is a helper component. So you could use whatever you want. You could say temperature converter helper or whatever, but I just use little asterisks to show that this is a helper component. And so we want it to look like this. So again, we'll use a flex layout. We'll add a text input, a paragraph, text input, paragraph. Center all of these. We're actually going to add a width here. So we'll make this 300. And then for the text input, we'll stretch it, and we'll also stretch the other one just to make it look a little nicer. For our component, we need some data. So let's drag in this data that I prepared earlier. So the data for this component is there's a F and a C, which corresponds to the Fahrenheit and Celsius. And so we can just drag that data into our text input, and you can see that it uses, it doesn't use the value, it uses the name of the attribute that is getting passed into the component. So let's do that for Celsius as well. And update these labels. Celsius equals. And it's really handy having all of these different pieces next to each other, so I don't have to remember how to spell Fahrenheit. And so, yeah, this kind of looks like the what we're trying to build. Let's eval and show it. So the idea behind this component is that you update the number here, and it also is supposed to update the other text input, which isn't hooked up yet. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to go back to Emacs. We have a temperature converter, and so we have a stub here, and the component we just built, that we just evaled, has the name temperature converter, and it's in this namespace that we're currently working in, and you can just use it like a normal function. So components built inside the tool are just normal functions, and you can use them from your code. So we're going to run this little snippet here, and all that does is shows the temperature converter, and so now we're going to use this temperature converter here that uses the component we just built, and so now the events are hooked up, so you can now we've implemented the events that power the temperature converter. And so the code for this is not very complicated. It basically just synchronizes. Basically, if the Fahrenheit text is updated, it updates the Celsius and vice versa. I'm not saying this is necessarily the best way to do it, but I'm not really focusing on how the effects work, because you can, that's kind of up to you, and it's, if you want to, any library that you want to use to make that happen is available, and you know, Membrane doesn't try to get in your way there, so that's kind of on you. Let's go to the next. Let's keep moving. Flight Booker. So this is what the Flight Booker component looks like. Again, we'll add a component. Call it Flight Booker. We're going to give it some data. So the data here has a flight type, a depart date, a return date, and then some flight options that we'll also use. So I'll add a flex layout, make it vertical, and use a radio bar. So one of the ideas we're going to demonstrate here is that in the previous example, we built a component in the tool, which we used from code. Now we're going to do the opposite, where we build a component in code, and we're going to use it in the tool. So we're going to add this date input component. For the Flight Booker example, they had this goofy date input thing, and so I built one of those in code, and since there's nothing special about components other than their functions that take data and return data, you can now use these in the tool transparently. You don't have to, there's no extra ceremony, there's no extra steps other than telling the tool what the inputs are expected. So we have 2 date inputs, and you can edit these, and the changes update live. So 2 inputs, and then we have a button. So let's add a button. We can change this to book. Add the data for the radio bar. So we've selected the radio bar. It has some options, which we've already set up earlier, as a selection, which will be the flight type. And so now it's updated the selection. The date input has, this is the depart date. This is the return date. And for this example, we want this input to be disabled if it's not, if the flight type is not returned. So we'll go ahead and set that up. And then the button is similarly disabled if you can't book. And so can't book is a function of the, oops. Oh, so not can. So I previously wrote a function in the 7GUI namespace, which you can use from the tool. And so we'll disable if you can't, if you're not ready to book yet. And yeah, that's it for this component. So it's a valid, show it. You can select one way and return flight. You can see the date format here that that they chose for this example. So we'll just plug in the date they have, 2014. And when this date is valid and it parses, it shows you that and you can book. And then if you need a return flight, you also need a valid date for the return flight. So that's the flight booker example. Let's keep moving. Timer. So let's add a component. And we're going to do the same trick we did earlier where we build a helper component using the tool. Flex layout. And we're going to nest these. So we have a paragraph and a progress bar. It says elapsed time. We're going to give the component some data here. So for this task, we need the elapsed time and a total duration. Going to center, and we'll start on this row here. So it's paragraph, and you could use a function for this format. So you can see that it has a particular format for the label here. I happen to know what it is, so I will just go ahead and type it in line. And this is the elapsed time. And you can see that it's updated here. Let's make this vertical. We add another flex layout with the duration. And we need a number slider. So you can see this is getting kind of cluttered. Typically I use this on the larger monitor, but I decided to use my laptop monitor just to make it easier to watch on YouTube. But in general, if you give it more screen space, you can really leverage the extra screen space. So the value for the duration here is this duration, so we'll drag that. The minimum for this number slider should be 1 because 0 duration doesn't make sense. We're going to change the max to 20. And usually the number slider just does integer values, but we can also use floating point numbers, center, and we need one last piece here, which is a button here at the bottom, so we'll add that. And this will reset the timer. and we need to give a user intent for when they click on the timer. So the intent, which is the name that I decided on earlier, is reset timer, and we'll pass the current data. And yeah, that's basically it for the component. You can see that it updates. Oh, we actually need to update this progress bar. So the value for this progress bar is the elapsed divided by the duration. And we can eval it, and it will update our instance here. But the reset doesn't work, as well as the fact that it's not hooked up to an actual timer. So I think I might have. Okay, so let's go to Emacs. So this is the code for doing all the timer stuff. I use Clojure Core Async. This is not necessarily an impressive code, but this is a demo. Didn't want to spend too much time on it, and it does some basic Core Async stuff. And so just like before, we have a timer, and we're going to use the timer component that we just built and just pass in data to it. And now we have a working timer. You can see it updates as you drag. If you shorten it past the elapsed time past the duration, it just stops and it can reset. And yeah, that's essentially the timer task. So let's keep moving. Let's build this CRUD app. So for this example, what I want to demonstrate is that we're going to build before building the full component, we're going to build a subcomponent. So we're going to, just this name and surname piece here, we're going to build just that subcomponent first, and then use that to build the CRUD task. So person editor. And for this component, we need some data. So it's just going to take a person, and we're going to edit this so that the attribute, so that the property is person itself. So the data for this component will look like this, and we use a flex layout. We're going to nest these, add a paragraph for the name. We're going to add a text input, which takes the first name and center it. Oh, oops, I did this the other way around. So the name is actually supposed to go here, and this is supposed to say name. So the benefit of seeing what you're working on as you're working on it is pretty apparent. And then we have this other flex layout where we're going to edit the surname. So let's do that. And add a text input. And for this text input, it takes the last name, and I'm going to center, and this flex layout is going to be vertical. So now we have a person editor, and kind of just to show you how that it works, we're going to add an inspector here. And so for this inspector, we're just going to take in the full person. And so we can eval and show, and you can see as we edit the text inputs, it updates the person, so that works. And we don't actually need this inspector for the CRUD task, so can eval that. And now we're going to create this CRUD component. So call it CRUD. We're going to give it some data. flex layout, add a paragraph, call it filter prefix. I'm going to add a text input. This is going to take the filter prefix here. We'll center, and there's a little bit more spacing here, so I'll just bump it over a little bit. And now the next row here is going to have, so this is like a multi-person selector. That's not like a typical component that's implemented yet. So I built a component for that. So, well, which I called CRUD selector. So I'll add that component to make it available in the tool. Again, that's just a normal component that you build with code. And so you can see that CRUD selector is now available to be used in the tool. And so we have a CRUD selector, and we can also drag in the person editor that we just built. So one of the ideas here is that a lot of these UI builders, you kind of like have to go all in on them. And one of the key design goals was that the tool works well with code, and the code can use the stuff produced by the tool pretty seamlessly. And so I think hopefully that's demonstrated here. And then we have one flex layout at the bottom for all the buttons. So let's add a bunch of buttons. We have create, update, and delete. We've also got to hook up all the data, which we haven't done yet. So we have a CRUD selector, has all of this stuff here. So we'll give it people. And you can see it as we put in the data, the preview updates immediately. We have filter prefix, edit person, and selection. And the same thing for the person editor. So it takes a person, which is edit person. And we also need to hook up these buttons to, or we need to have them returned intent. So create this. Update this. Delete this. Okay, and so that's more or less what the CRUD looks like. So let's eval and show it. So you have the selector, you can filter, you can select a person, you can edit or create, update, delete. And yeah, that's more or less what the CRUD task is all about. So let's keep going. So the next task is a circle drawer. So this one uses a dialogue. I mean, there's not any reason you couldn't use a dialogue. I just kind of hate them, so I didn't do that. So we're gonna do it and just put the slider in the tool itself. And yeah, so this component is going to be called a circle drawer. We're going to give it some data. And so again, not every component is going to, or a subcomponent is going to be something that you want to build inside the tool. So this circle drawing component, or the circle canvas is what I call it, is built outside of the tool. So we're going to go ahead and add those and make those available to the tool. And we're also going to use a different layout. So layout in Membrane isn't really special. Usually layouts are this special thing that only the UI library can decide upon and implement. And if you want something different, you better hope that it's included. But in Membrane, since everything's data, layouts are just data transformations. You take some elements and then you organize them, move them around. So there are built-in um, layout options, but if you want to build your own or use a third-party library, that's also available. So here we have a relative layout. Let's add the undo button. And what you can do with the relative layout is if you click on the component, you can actually move elements relative to each other. So let's add another button, and that will hopefully make a little bit more sense. So we're going to select this control point, and we're going to select the snap point. And so now this button is relative to the top right of this other button. So if we go back and try to move this button, you can see that these. So let's fill in the names. And so there's a limited number of layouts implemented currently. So, but hopefully more layouts will be available and you can build your own. But hopefully these will be the primary ones and the most useful ones will be included within Membrane or third-party libraries. So next we'll add the circle canvas. And for the circle canvas, we'll give it the data that it requires. And so you can see, if you put in data, you can see exactly what it'll look like. So let's move this circle canvas here. And we'll move it relative to the bottom of this button here. So that way, if we wanted to move this button around, you can drag all of those together. We also have a circle radius slider. So the reason this slider is, it would probably be better to make these more generic, but for the demo, I didn't want to spend time figuring out how to make all of these generic components for a not very useful user interface. So put this here, and let's move this up a little bit. And yeah, so this is more or less what the task is supposed to look like. Let's make sure we have all of these things hooked up. So we need to hook up the undo and redo buttons. Maybe you can already guess what these intents will be. And the undo button. And so yeah, now we've more or less recreated what we were going for. Let's show it. You can add circles. If you select a circle by right-clicking, you can do that. You can undo, redo. Yeah, that's more or less what the circle drawer is all about. And if you've been keeping track, we have one task left. So for this one, I didn't really feel like making a not very useful spreadsheet, but there's already kind of a spreadsheet-like component that's available. So we're just going to, and like I said earlier, not every component is going to be amenable to building inside the tool. And so let's add a, oh, we got to add it to our tool here. So yeah, there's a spreadsheet tool. We can valid and show it. I think it's kind of anticlimactic to finish with this. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make an Uber component that combines all of the tools that we've built so far. So let's put this in a flex layout and start adding. So all of the components that we've built so far are now available as components that we can then use in the tool, just like we demonstrated earlier. So we have a counter, we have a temperature converter. Hopefully it's this one. Nope. Flight booker, timer, CRUD, and circle drawer. We've got to go through and put the data in for each one of these. So, oh, actually we need to, if you just drag in data, it uses the value, but if you drag in data that's from one of the properties, then you can use it within the components. Oh, this should be vertical. Okay, so yeah, now we have the data here. We can use it in our subcomponents. So FC. Flight type, depart date, return date, flight options, elapsed duration, filter prefix, people, edit person, selection, circles, history, and selection. And then the spreadsheet, I didn't give any data. It just kind of uses its own data, so we can eval, we can show. Let's hide everything else. And yeah, you can see all of the components here. They all work. And yeah, that's basically it. And the reason I called this a spreadsheet component, I don't think I made it apparent, was that if you type in expressions here, it will get updated as you type. But yeah, that's more or less, that's the those are the 7 tasks here from 7GUI. If you thought this was interesting, please pay tribute to the algorithm, and thanks for watching.